After Russia's attack on Ukraine, European leaders looked nervously towards the heavens and wondered, could the missiles fall here too? Since October last year, 19 countries have joined the so-called European Sky Shield Initiative. It's a sign of the seriousness that so many have signed up so quickly and are pushing for a missile umbrella for their nations. But it's not only the number and speed that's caused consternation in some quarters, it's who's decided to join the pact and who hasn't. Welcome to Roundtable. I'm Philip Hampshire. Swiss neutrality has long been part of its history teaching, but is the mood changing? And what does their stance on the European Sky Shield do for the two heavyweights of the European Union, France and Germany?
A historic moment for neutral Switzerland, as it decides with Austria to join the European Sky Shield initiative. It was started by Germany last year, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The air defence system would aim to enable European countries to defend their skies jointly. 19 countries have already signed up to the initiative, including the UK, Netherlands and Nordic and Baltic states. But France is not part of the initiative and is against it. Instead, they've teamed up with other European nations to buy surface-to-air missiles. So two European heavyweights now seem set on different paths.
Joining me in the studio, we have Professor David Stupples. He's Professor of Military Intelligence Analysis and Electronic Warfare Research at City University of London. Meanwhile, in Corvallis in Oregon in the United States, we have Michael Peck. He's a defense journalist and a contributing writer for CEPA, the Centre for European Policy Analysis. And in Edinburgh, we have retired Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, who's a writer and defense analyst. Let me start off with you, Stuart, if I can. This idea, Sky Shield, is it a good one? It sounds like a deceptively simple question, but it's going to be a rather tricky one. Is this a good project to put forward now?
Well, it is a good question, actually, and I'm not going to be able to give you a full answer here, except to say that the European Sky Shield initiative is really a response to dismay at the initial success of Russian cruise missile and ballistic missile attacks in Ukraine. And the initiative was announced by Olaf Scholz in August 2022 and has now been signed up to by 19 European countries, with two others in the waiting list. What it seeks to do is to put up a layered anti-ballistic missile and cruise missile defense based on three systems: the German IRIS, medium-range anti-missile, if you like, the Patriot missile, the US system, which I've seen personally in operation in the Gulf in '91, and we can talk about that further if you wish, and the US Israeli long-range Arrow 3 missile. And I think that it is necessary. It's like, defense policy is like car insurance. You have to have it. You hope that you don't have to use it, but to not have it is a dereliction of duty. And I think that this is an interesting initiative, although it isn't the only initiative, which makes it slightly more confused.
Michael, let me take this up to you. You're on the west coast of the United States, so how does this plan look from where you are?
I guess I'm a little bit puzzled about some aspects of it. For example, is this supposed to be sort of a procurement organization to save money, different nations pooling resources? Or is this supposed to be some European equivalent of NORAD, North American Air Defense Command? If that's the case, NORAD is the United States and Canada, which speak the same language and more or less share a common culture. 17 nations, 19 nations, different languages, different politics. I'm curious, is this supposed to be something that's going to be able to react very quickly against, say, a hypersonic missile traveling at Mach 5 or Mach 10?
It is a good question. David, you are an engineer, technical expert in this kind of field. So let me ask you this. Do you think it's a good idea? And if you do, I suppose we've got to talk about the technicalities of the difficulties of connecting 19 nations' missile defense systems together, getting them all to work.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, though. Is that the passive side of this is the integrated NATO system. That's the radars that will search the skies for intrusion. They would also have the AEWs, the airborne systems, coming from large aircraft, and also the fighters as well. So all of that lot is connected up to bring in the information. So that's a passive type system. The active site system, as was talked about there by Stuart, doesn't it, is in fact the missile system. So what we need to be able to do is integrate the passive radars with these active kinetic missile systems. And there's a short range, medium, and long range, as mentioned before.
Well, we've got a graphic here. Let's pull that up so the viewers can see what we all know. 3 different overlayered, if you like, overlapping layers. We've got a German system for the short range. This is the German Iris-T SLM. Meanwhile, for the long range, they're expecting to use US Patriots. And for the very long range, they're using US-Israeli Arrow 3s, which I believe the Germans have already placed an order for. So this is a European Sky Shield, which is going to use US missiles and Israeli missiles. Some people will immediately see a problem there, won't they?
Well, the French will certainly say that we should be buying European as much as possible. But what you have to do is look at the quality of or should we say, the track record of the missiles themselves. And Patriot has been around for a long time, and it's been upgraded, etc. And so therefore, it's a very effective missile system. And the later parts of that will actually then look at the terminal high altitude missiles, which are required for ballistic attack on ballistic missiles. So Patriot can do that, although in this case they're going to use Arrow.
Very quickly, I know you haven't said whether you think this is a good idea or not.
Well, I know it's a superb idea. It's just that what each country will do is buy a set of these 3 missiles that will work together. From the country's point of view, they will be fairly independent, although a certain amount of integration can take place, but they will be independent. So what each country wants is a missile system, short, medium, long, that works. And that's the key thing. What they don't want to do is spend years buying 3 separate systems and trying to put them together. So therefore, that's why this is a good idea.
Stuart, let me bring this across to you. Is there going to be an immediate howl of complaint from people looking at this deal and saying, well, hang on a second, if it's going to be a European Sky Shield, why are we using, say, Israeli missiles? Why are we using American missiles? Shouldn't we be integrating together on a single European system?
Yes, well, I think the answer to that is yes. The French have already chosen not to join the initiative together with Spain and Italy and Poland. And I think the reason for that is that the French are slightly miffed that none of their domestically produced missiles are included in the initiative. But there is another aspect to this, is in that, so we have the German initiative, if you like, the ESSD. You've got the French initiative, but also American land-based Aegis anti-ballistic missiles are already installed in Romania and in Poland. So we have the prospect of 3 different missile systems trying to integrate themselves, and the command and control aspects of that, and who hands over missiles and orders missiles to be intercepted by which country with using which system, is really quite a complex one. So I don't think we should underestimate the complexity of the problem, although all these things, of course, can be overcome.
Michael, the Patriot missile does seem to be if you like, the correct one to choose, because it's got decades now of performance history that you could chart. It's been upgraded. We know what its performance is going to be like. But is that not going to cause friction between the different players here as they try and integrate this system, using a US missile and using an Israeli missile?
I think it's a very distinct possibility. Trying to get nations that may not always have a history of cooperation and whose cooperation may be subject to political frictions, differing national agendas. Another thing that I'm curious about, just to go back to the politics of this, is how does this work in terms of Sky Shield, in terms of NATO? What happens if you have, say, Turkey, which is NATO, but I don't think it's a member of Sky Shield? The Sky Shield going to be protecting Turkey. If a Russian submarine in the Mediterranean launches a missile that passes through Turkish airspace, is that a NATO issue? Is that the Sky Shield engage over Turkey? Is it a way to get into European territory? I'm curious how all these different organizations are going to work together.
Well, I feel we should pull up another graphic here to show who's actually in the deal and who isn't. It's already been mentioned by several of you. France is out, Italy's out, Spain is out. That's pretty obvious from the map. You can see a cordon running across Europe, though, everywhere from Great Britain right the way down to Bulgaria and, of course, all the way north in Scandinavia as well. But as you've already noted, Stuart, Poland is not in this agreement. Is that not like a whole? This seems like a really nice idea that's half-formed so far but already announced. Is that how you look at it, Stuart, or am I being unfair?
Well, I mean, I think Poland has its own system. As I mentioned, the American Aegis system, which is a land-based version of their maritime anti-ballistic missile, fielded in the U.S. Navy ships. But again, as I think everybody has now said, it's a matter of how this is integrated to make sure there are no holes in the missile defense system, and also the question of who's actually in overall control of coordinating it. Just one other thing I would just mention in passing is that waiting in the wings to join the Sky Shield initiative are Switzerland and Austria, which both countries which have been very assiduous in defending their neutrality in such matters. And there's all sorts of questions being asked whether, for example, Switzerland would choose to shoot down a Russian ballistic missile overflying its territory, or whether it would hand on that responsibility to France or to Germany. And these are the important questions. How is it coordinated? I think the passive hardware and the kinetic hardware, it's all more or less proven, but it's the integration and the overall command and control and who decides who engages what target, where and when.
David, if I bring this back to you, if we were looking at this missile system and we were having this conversation in, say, the year 2000 or the year 1990, and we were talking about it, people would giggle a little bit because they'd know that trying to hit a missile with another missile is a little bit like a bullet trying to hit another bullet in flight. But we've had 30 years of technological growth since then. Yeah. Is getting this off the ground purely a political problem, or is it a technological problem as well?
Well, I'd just like to take up the point of Stuart there, because the points he raised there were very, very valid. And it comes back to the point of how much integration is going to work. As I said before, the radar systems, not the passive radars, are all NATO ones anyway, are all integrated. They work. So therefore, the control of the airspace is coordinated. But the missile systems, as far as I understood them, each country will have a missile system, if it's one of these, the new systems, and they will all be integrated within country. But as far as I know, and I can't see it written anywhere, is to say how they're going to be integrated across countries. Because of a great deal of my life I spent in working with the Ministry of Defence, integrating systems, well, it's just not going to work unless they have first of all, a political agreement on this. Secondly, an operational strategy. And then you can get onto the technical people to put it together. But the top two are not there. As far as I can see, anyway.
Is there another problem with this? The moment you put in place a system like this, I realise that it's a very cheap analogy for me to bring forward, but if I bring up the Maginot Line, everyone knows the story of France having this extremely strong fortress along its border with Germany, and so Germany went around the side of it. I realise that that's a gross oversimplification, but if we were to look at the Sky Shield map again, you would be able to see that it crosses Europe in a diagonal line. But of course, we know in the United Kingdom that Russian Bear bombers occasionally come into UK airspace via Ireland. So coming in from completely the wrong side of Europe. Is that similarly going to be a problem? Maybe members of Sky Shield need to get other countries involved?
Well, as I said, the radar systems will in fact pick all that lot up. So the tracking of that targets are quite clear. But the countries will need to say, you know, if a missile is flying over, I would like them also to say, what if this ballistic missile is just taken off? It's just we've tracked it through a satellite system. Where is it going to come back down through the atmosphere? Is it going to come down over Switzerland? Is it going to come down over Germany? Where was it aimed at?
Whose responsibility is it to take care of this? The country it's flying over or the country it's heading towards? That kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's a lovely question.
Let me bring this up to you, Michael. You're looking at this for SEPA. So from a European perspective, how do you think these rows are going to play out and get resolved?
I think that's a good question.
The Swiss, for instance, the Swiss right wing right now, the Swiss right wing is absolutely up in arms about the prospect of this obliterating via the back door Swiss neutrality only very shortly after they've just boarded a load of American planes.
I think the question to me is this a prelude to closer European defense integration, or is the prerequisite for making this system work closer European defense integration? I guess to me, this sort of system has a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of vulnerabilities there, subject to, as you said, elections, far right parties, far left parties. And also the other question I would have too is, what is the timeline for this project? Are nations going to be willing? I don't think this is going to happen quickly. And if we're looking at something that's probably going to take a decade or more, I would think, is the political will, the economic resources, the defense budgets going to be there? Are nations going to stay the course?
Stuart, do you think the nations are going to be able to stay on course with this? I mean, this is going to be an enormous amount of investment, isn't it? There's a lot of cooks stirring in this pot.
It's the question for every multi-nation defense project that comes up time and time again. And the answer is sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Interestingly, the German Chancellor, Schulz, said when he announced this scheme that he hoped it would be up and developed within 5 years, which seems to be very optimistic. But, you know, you never know. Necessity does drive invention. And if the Russian threat, and that's really what we're talking about, persists and the war in Ukraine persists, then that will be a great incentive to do this as quickly as possible. But I wouldn't underestimate the difficulties. The other thing I would just maybe throw into the equation, you were talking about bypassing the Maginot Line. Well, the UK has got no anti-ballistic missile defense at the moment, although we're hoping to upgrade our Type 45 destroyers to have an anti-ballistic missile, anti-ship anti-ballistic missile system. But we have got no system at the moment that would protect us and look to our, obviously, our North American allies to do that on our behalf. So your question is very apposite. Can this whole thing be bypassed? And the answer is, you know, you need all-round defense.
Michael, the US perspective on this, normally if we were, back when Trump was president in the United States, he was constantly haranguing European nations, you're not spending 2% of your GDP on defense, you're below NATO thresholds, spend more, spend more, spend more. Is this sort of European Sky Shield initiative the kind of thing that the US administration, even under Biden, can get behind? Or do they look at this and thinking, hang on a second, because we're not going to have our control over this, and normally things are done through NATO, there's a partnership here, and they're circumventing it?
I think it may depend on which administration's in power, but I think that those are concerns. How does this interact via NATO? Another issue may be to what extent, okay, they're using American missiles for now. Will this continue in the future? How much of a share will go to American defense contractors? I think will be one of the issues. But yes, I think America would like NATO to have a role in this, at least some sort of consultative role. And I have to say, as an American, I do have to wonder, is a purely European initiative without American help based on past history, is that going to be a difficulty?
What do you think?
Well, I think the initiative itself is going to be very difficult. But I'd just like to raise one point was raised earlier by Stuart, is that the UK's air defence systems, that's the radar systems, cover the complete Area 12, which is the UK around Ireland, right the way up to Norway, and we integrate totally with the integrated system for NATO. So it's fully integrated. The problem is that it was raised is we don't have a missile system defence in this country. We got rid of that some time ago. I think the last one was Bloodhound. The UK does need that. But the point that really worries me about the thing, and it comes back to this business of where am I going to bring this missile down? So therefore, if, let's say, Belgium then fires I'm just picking on Belgium for the moment, fires a missile and brings the missile down in Switzerland, there's going to be thousands of bits falling into Switzerland.
A lot of rows.
There's going to be problems here. I think it comes back to, and I would like to see the politicians actually get to grips with this actually and come out with a policy. As a humble engineer, we only have to put it together if the policy has been described. But there's so much wrong with the policy.
Well, we got a quote here. This particular one comes through from NATO Deputy Secretary General Mircea Geoana had this to say. Germany's leadership through the European Sky Shield Initiative is a crucial step to ensure that NATO can effectively defend itself against air and missile threats. Stuart, they put together this idea back in October 2022. We're only around about, we're less than a year later, around about 9 months later. They've got 19 countries now signed up to this deal. What do you think prompted the Germans suddenly going from being lackluster supporters of defence spending to try to corral the rest of Europe into spending more?
Well, the cynic in me would say that this sort of initiative involves large sums of money, and every country will want a little bit of slice of that pie. And of course, Germany has long prided itself as being the industrial centre of Europe, which it is. But the interesting question from the statement you read out from the NATO Deputy Secretary is that it seems to be assumed that NATO will actually take control of this system in some fashion or other. And I think that's quite encouraging because our US friends have consistently been asking Europe to take a bigger share of responsibility of the defence of Europe through NATO. And perhaps this is a sign that at long last, given the difficulties in Ukraine, European nations are beginning to wake up and look to their defences more seriously.
Michael, if I come up to you, if you were a gambling man and you were looking at this, there have been plenty of attempts at missile defense shields from Star Wars across the one that the Russians put in place around Moscow, Iron Dome around Israel. Some of them work well, some of them don't work well. If you were a gambling man and you were looking at what you've seen of the proposals so far, do you think this is going to be a working system or do you think not?
My best guess would be that it will be a system that will work partially well, hopefully, against a limited number of missiles, but as some sort of 100% defense shield, no, I don't think so. I think and going by the US experience of missile defense, I'm not, maybe we could stop a couple of North Korean missiles, but any kind of massive ballistic missile, no, my bet would be that this would be a deterrent to raise uncertainty in the mind of, say, Russia, that some of those missiles will be intercepted. But the notion that this is going to be some sort of impenetrable shield or against, I don't know, hundreds of missiles, no, I don't think so.
Well, Stuart, Michael, David, thank you very much, all three of you, for joining me. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, but you can see more discussion and debate if you head on over to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me here and the entire team, thank you for watching, and goodbye.